Hello, everybody. This is John Mark Johnson Jr. again. I'm the host of Relationship and Truth, and I'm going to be taking a few minutes today to get the ball rolling on, frankly, a topic that I have been avoiding, and that is the topic of this current panic-demic, and it is a panic-demic, and the Christian church. As a lot of you guys know, I'm actually rather reticent to deal with controversy, which is very ironic, I realize, for a YouTube channel that deals with apologetics, that spends a lot of time and sometimes hours telling particular people why they're wrong. But the truth of the matter is that I actually really do not like conflict at all. That is not something that I enjoy to any extent. And the only reason why I have this channel and I say the things that I do is because I feel compelled by truth to say the things that are true, at least as best as I understand them. And this panic-demic situation, I've dealt with it to a certain extent in some videos, but not very much. Personally, I was actually honestly kind of hoping that it would all blow over and we could get back to life as normal, but there have been so many changes and so many foundational, fundamental changes that obviously isn't possible. It has completely changed the landscape. It's completely changed the way that we view each other, that we view the world, that we view the living situation that we have. It has changed a lot of things in very fundamental ways, and because of that, Christians have to address it. And what in particular sparked this video was a sermon that my pastor of my church preached yesterday. And he preached a sermon that talked about some of the issues. And in some regards, I wouldn't agree with the sermon in its entirety. In some regards, I would. And it's not like the sermon that he preached dealt with it in great detail. And no, certainly not. There are a lot of things that could be talked about with this current situation, and you're not going to get it all in just one little sermon. And after he preached the sermon that night, he called me up and he talked to me about it, because he knows that he and I don't see eye to eye on all of those things. We actually agree far more than a lot of people think that we do. But he called me up just to talk about it and chat with me about it a little bit. And, you know, for all of our differences that we do have some things in common and some concerns in common. And one of those concerns is the divide that this whole situation has brought into the church. And in some respects, division is a normal part of church life and even a necessary part of church life. Even in the New Testament, I believe it's in one of the Corinthian letters by Paul, we are told that there must be factions among you, that there may be truth among you, essentially is what Paul says. And in so much as truth is an exclusive thing, there are going to be differences, and there are certain beliefs out there in the Christian church right now regarding how to deal with the whole panic-demic situation that are mutually exclusive. They cannot be true at the same time. It's either this or that. There has to be one way or the other that it goes. Truth is exclusive, and because of that, truth is going to divide out from error, and because of that, division is an unfortunate reality of Christian life. That being said, though, Christians should never seek that division, and there are a lot of people on both sides right now that are seeking that division, that are seeking to paint people who are on the other side of the aisle in the worst light possible, and frankly not deal with them fairly or fully, and that needs to stop. One of the things that Christ said very frequently, and that the Apostle John recorded for us more than once, was that we as Christians are to be known by our love, and especially our love for one another. And when it comes to situations like this, that are as volatile as this, and frankly as significant as this is not an insignificant issue. When it comes to issues that are as significant as this, there is going to be a very real tendency to go to the extremes, go to the mat, and try to identify who the true, real Christians are and color everybody else a heretic. And to a certain extent, like I said, there is a necessary component of truth that requires that if people are saying something that is fundamentally contradictory to the truth, you're going to have to oppose it. That is a true responsibility of Christians, is to understand biblical truth, to proclaim it, and to proclaim it in contradistinction to what is not in accord with biblical truth. That is a necessary part. But the division that creates should never give us any pleasure, and it should not be something that we seek out. Where possible, we should seek unity in the brotherhood. We should seek unity among our Christian brothers and sisters, that statement of Jesus, that they will know we are Christians by our love, particularly our love for one another, would indeed ring true. And when it comes to this issue of the whole Panic-demic and all that, you can see it online, you can probably see it in your own church, and like I said, in my own church, a sermon was preached on it, and not a sermon that I entirely agreed with in every single respect, although certainly more than a lot of people might expect. It hits home, and it has hit home for a lot of people, and the battle lines have already been drawn. And what I would like to invite us all to do is to take a second to pull back and reconsider where we are, and especially why we are where we are. And this is something that I think my pastor and I would greatly agree on. Given our conversation last night, I'm like 100% convinced that he and I would agree on at least this point. That the reason why a lot of people are taking the tack that they are with regard to this whole situation, unfortunately doesn't always have to do with Christian truth. There are a lot of people who are against, frankly, what has been government overreach. I'm not going to back down from that position. There are a lot of people who are against that government overreach, mostly on the basis of, frankly, their own desires for freedom, their own desires for autonomy, what they feel as being their rights as Americans and things like that, especially here in America. Obviously, your rights as Americans are not going to matter if you're from Canada or from Italy or something like that. But for here in America, we have a very strong rebellious streak, a very strong freedom-loving streak, and it's kind of in our nature as Americans. And unfortunately, doing things for that reason is not the same thing as doing those things because of what the Bible says. And a lot of people who would be on my side of the issue in saying that these are government overreaches, that these are wrong, and that the church needs to denounce these, a lot of those people who would be on my same side in saying those kinds of things do not have the same motivation that I do, and that concerns me. And that the real issue for a Christian, regardless of what side you're on, should be that what you're saying and why you're saying it is Christian truth. Is this actually true from a Christian perspective? Is this what the Bible teaches us? Is this biblical truth? And like I said, a lot of the things that I've heard recently are not grounded in Christian truth. They are not grounded in Christian principles from both sides, as far as I'm concerned. There are people who are, from my perspective at least, okay with the government overreach and would point to passages like Romans 13 and passages like that saying we need to be mindful of the governing authorities and submit to them, etc., etc. And while they might have passages that they could throw up for that, like Romans 13, I would argue that they're not dealing with those in a holistic manner. They're not considering the whole of Scripture when they look at those issues. And also, frankly, a lot of them, their eschatology sucks. And because of that, it prevents them from interpreting those passages in an appropriate manner. Okay, just saying what my perspective on it is. But the bigger issue, like I said, that both my pastor and I would agree on, is that our reasoning needs to be biblical, and a lot of times on both sides it isn't. And then additionally, even though this is a situation with very high stakes, it is a situation where we should seek for unity where possible, and that is only going to happen if we hear each other out. And to that effect, in the description box of this video, I'm going to leave a couple of links. One of them is a link to an article that my pastor sent out on this topic, on the panic-demic topic. And frankly, I don't agree with it, at least not in its entirety. But that being said, that doesn't mean that that article doesn't bring up some legitimate points that do need to be considered. And as a counterpoint to that, I'm going to link to a video that was done by Jeff Durbin of Apologia Church, where he is preaching a sermon that is addressed to the governor of Arizona. And his sermon, unlike a lot of people's sermons on this topic, is eminently biblical, eminently holistic in its approach. And there are valid points that need to be considered there as well. And so I'm putting out this video as an invitation to all of you to look at both of these and consider the fact that you may be wrong, and that you shouldn't be too inclined to toss your fellow Christian brothers and sisters under the bus because they stand in opposition to you on this particular issue. And I'm saying that even to my own pastor, Reverend Christopher. And for those of you who don't know, in my denomination, Reverend is the title that is given to the pastor. That is not a put down at all. This is a man that he is my friend. I have great respect for him, both as my elder in the church and on a personal level. But I'm saying even to you, Reverend Christopher, that frankly, you're biased and you can be pig-headed and stubborn. And the reason why I know that is because you're a human being, and human beings in general are biased and pig-headed and stubborn, and I'm implicating myself in that. And it is entirely possible that your background, frankly, being from Canada, and your influences from, say, some people in California and other places have deadened you to the freedoms that the Bible speaks of, and to the mission that the Bible speaks of being people who would promote godly freedom in the world. I want you to be sensitive to that possibility. And for my part, I have to admit that there's bias on my part as well. I was raised primarily, well, at least a lot of the places that I remember growing up, were actually in northern Idaho. And for those of you who do not know, northern Idaho is fairly famous for not liking the government. That is definitely a bias that exists there. And so I'm biased, but in the other direction. And as a great many Christians of old have said, the truth usually lies somewhere in the middle. The only problem, though, is you're not going to figure out that middle way of truth, as the ancients spoke of it, unless you're actually willing to figure out what the other side is saying and why they're saying it. Like I said, some of the people that are on both sides don't have a biblical reason for what they're saying, and I don't pay them any mind. But there are people on each side that can actually enumerate biblical reasons for why they take the position that they hold. And those need to be carefully considered. Like I mentioned before, our responsibility as Christians is, yes, to proclaim biblical truth, but to do that, you first have to understand biblical truth. And that means that you need to give a full hearing and consideration to the biblical arguments that are out there. And so I'm inviting everyone, like I said, even including my own pastor, and I'm doing this as respectfully as I can, and with the understanding that he is in fact my pastor, he is in fact my elder, and that I'm inviting him to do this as a friend, knowing that he shares the same concerns that I do of wanting Christians to be unified in this, wanting Christians to show love and respect for each other in these things and be willing to deal with these kinds of issues without blowing up at each other, without taking positions on the opposing hills and launching javelins at each other, and that we would do so in a biblical manner. Okay. This is what I want to see in the church, is Christian unity. And I want it to be a Christian unity that is based on biblical truth. And that can only happen if you engage with both sides. So like I said, I'm going to link to the article that my own pastor sent out. I don't agree with it in its totality, but it does make some very legitimate points that do need to be considered. And I'm also going to link to the sermon that Jeff Durbin did for the governor of Arizona, because it also is biblical. And while you may not agree with it, at least not in every point, I think you will understand that there is actually a biblical reason for why people who are taking that position are actually taking it, that there is actually a biblical basis for it. And hopefully out of this, we'll be able to come to some kind of greater understanding of the issue and hopefully a more biblical understanding of the issue, and we'll continue in that conversation. And that's why I'm doing this. Not to say at this point that one perspective is completely without fault and that the other, is completely wrong. Most of the time, in most situations, when you have differences of opinion, there are at least valid points that are made on the other side. That's not my point here. My point is to get us all to think about it, to be aware of our own biases, our own opinions, and the confirmation bias that we all have. We all want our position to be true, and we tend to ignore things that would oppose it. And we also, especially in the Reformed community, we tend to be rather proud and arrogant, just to be honest. And we tend to think that we already know what we need to know, and whatever position that we've come to is the correct position. And that's not always true. In fact, a lot of times it isn't. I want us to sit down, take a couple of minutes, and actually think our position through biblically. And the only way we can really think our position through biblically is if we are being confronted with another opposing viewpoint that is provided with biblical support. And that's why I'm linking to both of these things. So don't go to the one that you think is going to, confirm whatever it is you want to believe. Look at both of them. Okay, the article is not overly long. The sermon is longer. Okay, it's a sermon by a Reformed guy. It's going to be long. Okay, but neither of them is, so long as to be utterly prohibitive. This is a major issue, and it's a major dividing point. You have the time to look into it. And I would highly suggest that whoever is with you that you can snag to take with you, that you have them look at it with you. For those of you who are married, invite your spouse to do this with you. Read the article together. Watch the sermon that Jeff Durbin addressed to the governor of Arizona together and discuss it in detail. Get the Bible out and actually lay it there and figure out what the thing actually says, and try to be consistent in so doing. Okay, this is something that we as Christians need to have figured out, because I guarantee you that issues like this are going to come up again in the not too distant future. Okay, if it happened once, it's going to happen again. That's just the nature of history. And we need to make sure that we have our duckies in a row and that we know exactly what our response is going to be. And that response, for those of us who claim to be biblical Christians, it has to be a biblical response. And like I said, I'm pulling my reverend into this because he is kind of on the opposite side in some ways, not every way. But he is kind of on the opposite side of this issue, and I want him to engage with it as well. And frankly, out of all the people that would watch this, he's probably the one who's least afraid of engaging with it, to be honest. But that is what needs to happen. Okay, when the church speaks about these issues, it needs to do so with a full awareness of everything that is being said from a biblical perspective. And we need to be 110% that we have it right before we start drawing dividing lines. And we do need to seek for unity where unity is possible. Truth by nature is an exclusive thing. But we need to seek unity where possible. And that can only happen is if you're willing to let go of the things in your own position that are weak, that are not actually true, that are not actually justifiable. And that's why I'm presenting both sources. Like I said, I don't agree with the article in its totality. That doesn't mean that there aren't some very real concerns that it has that Christian people, that the people of God need to dutifully consider. And on the same side, for those of you who might not like my position at all, the sermon that Jeff Durbin preached to the governor of Arizona is likewise similar. What he says is eminently biblical, and because of that, you need to consider what is said in it. Now, at some point in the future, I may decide to do a video where I enunciate my own thoughts on the matter and my own biblical basis for things a little bit more. But frankly, Jeff Durbin did a pretty good job, and his views would be fairly coincident with my own. So, why reinvent the wheel? There are some subtleties, and I might talk about those at a future point. But I think that putting both of these things out there in juxtaposition to each other will provide a decent cross-section of what is out there and what needs to be considered. And like I said, church, we need to get our act together because right now we don't. What people see is division, and it's not necessarily a biblical division. It's not necessarily a division based on truth. There's a lot of confirmation bias going on. There's lots of pig-headed stubbornness going on, speaking from my own experience and from my own place. And we need to open our eyes and make sure that what we're seeing is actually what the Bible tells us to see, rather than what our culture and history have told us to see. And it's very difficult for us to separate biblical truth from cultural truth. And I'm speaking even directly to my own reverend on that one. Okay? You are, by past, a Canadian, and you're very influenced by outside forces. And frankly, Canada does not have a great track record when it comes to the influence of Christianity in that culture. It failed miserably. And I want you to recognize that failure and perhaps some of the reasons why it failed. At the same time, though, that doesn't mean that Americans have an exclusive hold on biblical truth, not at all. And thinking that something is true because it's the American thing to do is really stinking thinking for a Christian. That should never even come into their mind. The reason why we should have a particular point of view as Christians isn't because it's the American thing to do. It should be because it's a biblical thing to do. And if you cannot support your position biblically, it's not a position that you as a Christian should be holding. And I'm going to get a lot of flack for that comment, I'm sure. So anyways, that is my invitation. Look at both of the sources in the description box. Carefully consider them. You have the time. This is an important enough issue that it needs to be considered. And maybe you've already dealt with this kind of stuff and you've seen things on both sides and whatnot. I'm not trying to implicate those kinds of people. There are thorough people out there. But still, it is worth taking the time to engage with both sides of the issue and really make sure that you have stuff down, and to be willing to give the other side, even if you don't agree with them, a full hearing. Like I said, the article that I'm linking to from my pastor, I don't agree with it fully, but I have to admit there are legitimate points that are made. And we're not going to come to any useful understanding of the truth if we cannot hear the other side. So thank you all for your time and attention. And for those of you who are in Christ, go with God and be blessed. Please do not take this as a negative thing. This is not, I hate you because you disagree with me or something like that. That isn't the case here. I'm concerned about the witness of Christians in the world, and I want us to stand unified, and I want us to make sure that we're standing unified on the Bible. It is not because I hate you that I'm saying these things. It is because I want to see God glorified in the world that I'm concerned about these issues, and I'm bringing them up. I'm bringing them up as a brother in the Lord, a concerned brother in the Lord who cares for you and who cares for the truth of God. You understand? You get it? All right. As I said, for those of you who are in Christ, go with God and be blessed, be at peace. And for those of you who are not, I pray that you would come to know the true Christ of history, the only genuine Savior of mankind. Amen.